What's going on, everybody, and welcome on into the Dawg House here on the OBR streaming network, where we are going to preview the upcoming Cleveland Browns game with our special guest. You see him on the screen. It's Steven Haglund. Steven, I'm just going to bring you right in right off the bat. Steven hosts the Guilty as Charged podcast out there covering the Chargers in sunny California, where I feel like we got sunny California weather here in Ohio as we're pushing 80 degrees every day here in late October. It's not exactly the home field advantage we're looking for down at Huntington Bank Field when a team from Southern California comes into play. But I'll tell you what, Steven, you picked a really good week to schedule the Browns and the Chargers to play each other. So you did a good job there, because this has been a pretty miserable show all season long. And I feel like for the first time, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of good vibes going on here in Cleveland. So I think we're going to have a really fun time on the show.
Yeah, I hope so. We were hoping that it would continue to be a miserable show. No offense. We were hoping to see Mr. Deshaun Watson for this week, but Jameis Winston should provide some fireworks. The sound bites from last Sunday were incredible. So I'm really excited about this one. When the season came out, it was like, man, if the Browns can just kind of find their stride on offense, this should be a pretty difficult test for the Chargers. And now it seems like that's kind of more turning to be possible, and hopefully for you guys' sake and your listeners' sake, the Browns have not dug themselves too big of a hole that they can crawl out of. So hopefully Jameis can stick it around and play well, but not too well on Sunday.
Well, Steven, man, it's been a couple of years. You had me on the show with you out there to talk about, I think, the last time the Browns and Chargers played.
Yeah.
How's everything going out there? First of all, just catch up with you for a minute. Everything going well with the Guilty as Charged podcast and all the coverage. I see you've been doing some really cool stuff with the Chargers themselves out there. So things look like they're going pretty well for you out there.
Yeah, the podcast is going really well. I actually was at the last Chargers and Browns game, the thriller in LA, when Baker Mayfield and Justin Herbert just kind of went crazy. It was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most intense games I've ever seen in person. But after that season, the Chargers reached out to us and loved our coverage. And so we worked with them for the 2022 season and the 2023 season. And then, things changed quite a bit with Mr. Jim Harbaugh. And unfortunately, we're not able to get, renewed with the team. But, we're still doing our own thing, obviously, with Blue Wire and as you guys know. So podcast has been going great. The team, unfortunately, has not been super good since we started, covering them, but it is what it is. And we're hopeful that Mr. Jim Harbaugh can turn it around for the long haul here.
Well, we're going to dive into all of it real quick. Let me give a shout out to the OBR here. The Orange and Brown Report is the oldest and largest independent Cleveland Browns coverage site in all of Cleveland. And that's where you're watching us right now. So make sure you get over to theobr.com and make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you are following all the great work. We've got a huge staff here with the OBR, and they do incredible work, whether it's the guys down at the stadium and down at the facility giving you the insider information, or whether it's our analytics guys writing stuff left and right. Our men and women that cover the Cleveland Browns are spectacular. So make sure you're over at theobr.com and following there. And whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitch tonight, make sure you hit subscribe, hit like, and I'll even give a shout out to our opponent tonight. Check out Steven on Twitter at Steven I. Haglund, and check out the Guilty as Charged podcast. I think it's GAC Podcast 17 on Twitter. I always love, it's one of my favorite things that I've done, Steven, since I've started this show, where we really just preview the upcoming episode. And I encourage everybody watching to do it. Just, if you like listening to Steven, he's a good dude. He knows his stuff about the Chargers. If you want to know what the Chargers are thinking about this matchup with the Browns, if you want to know what the fans are thinking about this matchup with the Browns, and if you don't know what they're thinking about their own team, get over and follow them. Get over and give Steven a listen all this week, as he'll be talking about this game all week long. But yeah, Steven, the last time the Browns played the Chargers, now I know these guys are begging me in the comments to find somebody they can hate. I don't think this week's going to be that week. I promise you, for the Steelers, I'm going to try to find somebody you can just hate. I promise.
That's a little bit easier, right? Because, division rival.
Correct.
That's an easy one. TJ Watt, stuff like that.
Correct. And I made the mistake of kind of making friends with the Ravens guy. And that's problematic because he's nice and people like him, and awful. So I promise you, with the Steelers, I promise I'm going to try to get somebody we can all hate. Steven is not going to be that guy. So let's talk a little bit, and let's start with your team out there in LA. with the Chargers. It's the first year of the Jim Harbaugh era out there. And I know there's a lot of excitement that went along with that, because the last time we saw Jim Harbaugh in the NFL, he was a Super Bowl caliber coach with the San Francisco 49ers, as again, all of you guys are familiar with out in the California area. So just talk about the early impressions of Harbaugh kind of having his impact on the team. Is it where you want it to be at this point, or are there things where you're like, well, I'm a little concerned about that? How's it going in total with Mr. Khakis himself, Jim Harbaugh?
I think, the whole thing about Jim Harbaugh and hiring Jim Harbaugh, right, is that he is going to bring in the program, right? And it's going to be a whole scale change to how this team has operated in the past. And, under Brandon Staley, they were very analytically driven. They were very conservative in their practices approach. They were very sports science driven. And not to say that they aren't now, but it was going to be a drastic 180 turn from the Brandon Staley era. And obviously, rightfully so, after that era did not go very well. So hiring Jim Harbaugh, it's a lot. There's a ton of Harbaugh-isms that come out every single week. And he's a little loony, but the sound bites are hilarious. Like this week, he compared. So against the Cardinals, the Chargers did not score a single offensive touchdown, despite crossing the 40-yard line 7 times. And then this week, they scored 3 offensive touchdowns. And he compared the change to like opening an olive jar, about how like when you open an olive jar, if it's packed properly, you can turn it over and none of the olives will pop out on their own. You have to like go in there and like plop them out.
For sure.
And you're just sitting like, how do you come up with this kind of little soundbite about an olive jar and comparing it to the Chargers and offensive touchdowns? So he's hilarious at the podium, but his players love him. Like Justin Herbert cannot say enough good things about him. Khalil Mack cannot say enough good things about him. And they like tore this roster down to the studs from last regime. Yeah. They have like $60 million in dead cap from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler and players like that. But this regime, like these players, they love playing football for Justin Herbert and for Jim Harbaugh, excuse me. They traded for Elijah Molden from the Titans, and he had an interception in the first game, so he got a lot of pub and everything like that. And they asked him like, hey, so like, how does this compare to what you're used to? And he compared it to like Jim Harbaugh's football Jesus. Like they love playing for this man. He's so player friendly. He's got like 8 former 49ers on the coaching staff for the Chargers. So it's just all about the Jim Harbaugh vibes and creating this culture that has really turned things around. And the record does not show it, right? The offense is kind of struggling, but this season was always about like establishing the culture, establishing the toughness mentality, and finding some players who could potentially become long-term building blocks, which we can touch on. But so far that has been good to see. But in year one, with the lack of resources, there are definitely some roster holes that could potentially be addressed next week. If not next year, they're in much better shape, financially.
You told the story about the pickle jar. Now I'm looking at this picture that our producer Ian put up on the screen, and all I can think is Harbaugh's just sitting there like, listen, kid, remember the olive jar.
Yeah.
Remember the olive jar. And Herbert's like, what the hell is this guy talking about?
And Jim Harbaugh loves Justin Herbert, man. Like there was a press conference a couple of weeks ago where Justin Herbert like made this really good play, and Jim gets at the podium the next day and he's like, yeah, I just want to be like Justin. And like, if I could steal his body, like I would. And I even went to our equipment manager and I had to go get the same shoes that Justin works out in, because I just want to be like Justin. And I'm like, Jim is this 62-year-old man who has done everything that you could possibly dream of.
Uncle Jim.
He loves Justin Herbert. So yeah. He loves his players. He can't talk, highly about enough of his players. And I think it shows on the field. They believe in the coach, and the coach believes in them. And as you guys see, like, the difference in the energy of the quarterback switch did so much for the Browns on Sunday. When you have a coach who really believes in you this much, it can change a player's career. I genuinely believe that. And we're seeing that with the Chargers so far this season.
So here's, we're obviously looking at the Chargers from afar. Obviously, we're in the same conference, but, I don't think every Browns fan is watching every Chargers game. I don't think every Chargers fan is watching every Browns game. And so when you read up a little bit, I've seen some people voicing some frustration about, and maybe you hit on maybe the biggest nail, which is they tore this offense down a little bit this year.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you get rid of Mike Williams and you get rid of Keenan Allen and you get rid of Austin Eckler, and they brought some players in. I mean, basically, he stole the running backs from his brother, and there are some good wide receivers. We're going to talk about one of them that's having a phenomenal start to his career. But I've heard some rumblings about just here you have this offense, right? And it's kind of offensively in that kind of bottom 10 in the league in a lot of categories, right? Especially if we're just looking at basic numbers, right? They don't throw the ball for a ton of yards. They don't throw the ball for a ton of touchdowns. They don't run the ball for a ton of yards, although they're a little better. They're a bit more average, league average when it comes to rushing the football. But it's a team that's scoring about 18 points a game. So they're not finding the end zone a ton. And I've heard some rumblings about just why it always comes back to Justin Herbert, and it always comes back to the head coach. And listen, while Justin Herbert hasn't been throwing for 300 yards a game, he's pretty efficient. He's not passing for a ton of yards, but 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's not turning the ball over on the season. You'd like to see those numbers a little more gaudy out of a franchise quarterback, but is there something to be said about it feels like Justin Herbert? I got to tell you, here's what it is from the outside, Steven. It feels like Justin Herbert has the potential and the physical capabilities and everything right there at his fingertips to just be a top tier quarterback in the NFL. That's what it feels like. And then it feels like every year we spend a lot of time talking about why Justin Herbert isn't getting unlocked the way he should, why he isn't putting up the numbers to put himself in that category. So what's your take on the entire Justin Herbert situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of layers there. I think you can look at his first 2 seasons and you see the guy who broke every single rookie passing record in the book, passing yards, passing touchdowns, total touchdowns, QBR, everything. Like, he was one of the best rookie quarterbacks that we've ever seen.
Yes.
And CJ Stroud comes along, and now people have forgotten that. But then in 2021, he throws for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. And people forget it because Brandon Staley was in his first year of his regime. They had a situation in the last 4 games where they needed to win 2 of the games to get into the playoffs, and they only won once. One of those games was to the awful Texans team because they had a COVID outbreak, and Justin missed that game, and Joey Bosa missed that game, and Keenan Allen missed that game. And Rex Burkhead ran for like 185 yards, and it was awful, right? Because all the best players were out with COVID. And then the Week 18 game against the Raiders happens, and the infamous Brandon Staley timeout, and it goes to overtime. And I was at that game in Vegas, and I have never seen a quarterback do the things that he has done on the field in that game. So there's all this potential. And even after that game, like, all of us in Chargers fandom were like, okay, this team's on the right track. They almost made the playoffs. Justin Herbert just threw for 5,000 yards. And then week 2, 2022 comes out, and Justin Herbert breaks 3 ribs and continues to play through it. And then he also tore his labrum. So 2022 was kind of a lost season. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars game happened where they blew a 27-3 lead. And so 2022 was kind of awful. And then the same kind of thing happens in 2023. So you have this 4 seasons of data, right? And 2 of them for Justin Herbert look amazing. And then the team and himself just kind of fell apart. And that's why you have Jim Harbaugh coming in here to hopefully get the team around him to a place where they can kind of continue to support him. This season, one of the biggest issues is that they don't really have a ton of quality receivers, and their receiver room has been injured. They signed DJ Chark to a decent contract. It was like 1 year, $5 million. He has yet to play. And Joshua Palmer, always, right? Joshua Palmer has been he was kind of the number 3 under Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and he would be the 2 when one or the other would kind of miss some action. He was really, really solid. Well, he's dealt with a calf injury, an elbow injury, and a knee injury this year. And so it's basically just been Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly, who's their blocking tight end. They're the 2 main pass catchers. And so that's kind of the state of the offense, is just there were real roster limitations. And then Greg Roman is just he's not a passing designer, right? Like, he's a run game designer. And so there's some issues from the scheme perspective. There's some issues from the personnel perspective. But when Justin Herbert is healthy, he just has shown the last 2 weeks that he's able to put up 350 yards against the Cardinals and 320 against the Saints. And he can elevate the guys around him. But it's just been it's been a very up and down offensive side of the ball when you're talking about the passing game, for sure.
Well, and then when you talk about the running game, obviously you talked about Greg Roman, a guy that spent a lot of time with the Baltimore Ravens, and you talk about the 2 running backs, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, that came over. Listen, Browns fans are going to be ecstatic that Austin Eckler is nowhere near the field. Because we know over the last couple games, I think you and I, like you said, you and I talked before that Baker Mayfield and Justin Herbert showdown out there in LA. But there was a game, I think a couple years ago, I think Jacoby Brissett was playing.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that game.
Nick Chubb broke off a big run at the start. Man, the Browns looked great. And then Austin Eckler just did Austin Eckler things in that game, and the Chargers won that game. Browns fans are going to be real happy to not see Austin Eckler out there on the Chargers side of things, because he seems to always smash the Cleveland Browns. But J.K. Dobbins has been pretty good. And that's a name that brings up a lot of happy memories here in Ohio, for sure, as an Ohio State Buckeye. And he's a guy that showed some of those flashes in Baltimore, but man, he seemed to get hurt every single year. And then you would have Gus Edwards that would come behind him and show those flashes and then get hurt every single year.
Yeah.
So those 2 guys, I know, is Gus hurt? I can't. I forgot to.
Gus is on injured reserve. It was a really weird situation. So like training camp comes around, right? And like Gus is not practicing, and Jim Harbaugh, who refuses to talk about injuries, is not really like saying anything. And then Greg Roman kind of lets slip, like, oh, he had off-season surgery.
Oh.
And then Jim Harbaugh like came to the podium the next day and was like, no, that didn't happen. Like, we're not talking about that. And we were like, oh,
it's so good.
So he is on injured reserve with an ankle injury. This
I don't even know who that guy
week,
was.
Yeah, exactly. This upcoming week is his final game that he has to miss. We'll see what happens after that next week. So J.K. Dobbins is the RB1. He's been fantastic. And then they have a rookie named Kamani Vidal out of Troy, who has been the RB2 in Gus Edwards' absence.
So, yeah, obviously the running game, J.K. Dobbins, is going to be a big focus for the Cleveland Browns defensively. And, again, they just got done with a guy that is running for 6.5 yards per carry in Derrick Henry over there in Baltimore, and a guy that's trying to threaten to break the single-season rushing record. So I hesitate to say it doesn't get easier. It certainly does, but I think anybody – is a little easier than what Derrick Henry's doing right now. Yeah. But again, J.K. Dobbins off to it pains me to say it because you guys are the opponent for this week, but it's great to see J.K. Dobbins just out there running the ball healthy again, because he really is a really talented player. And he's a guy that a team should be able, if he can stay healthy, to just be the bell cow back to trust to give the ball to and pick up yards. He's been doing that for the Chargers.
Yeah, he's on pace for over 1,000 yards rushing this year, which the Chargers have not had a back do that since 2018 in Melvin Gordon. So for all of Austin Eckler's, greatness, like it was a lot of pass catching, right? Yes. So they've, J.K. Dobbins has been very consistent for them. He creates a lot of missed tackles, which is fantastic. The thing which, he just tore his Achilles last year, so he doesn't have the same top end speed as he used to. It can show up every once in a while. He's had, I think, 4 runs of 40 plus yards, but it's the burst like at the initial second level, like the top, like the ability to turn a 5-yard run into a 20-yard consistently is not it's not the same there. So he's been good. His vision is insane to me. Like he'll jump cut over to like 3 holes to the left, and then boom, he'll take a 2-yard gain and turn it into a 10-yard gain very consistently. So I am a little concerned about the amount of carries they're giving him without Gus Edwards, just because, again, he's a guy who's had an Achilles, an ACL, an MCL, like all these injuries, right? So he's healthy right now, and it's a great story. Again, Jim Harbaugh was hyping him up about, comeback player of the year on Sunday, which I think it should be in the conversation. So he's playing great, but I am just like in the back of my head, I'm like, man, I would really love to see a healthy like RB2 situation, and they don't really trust Vidal quite yet because he's a rookie. They're giving him like 5 or 6 touches a game, 10, 15 snaps a game. So there's a lot on J.K. Dobbins' plate right now.
So again, we've talked a bit about the Chargers offense. Let's just talk about the unit that they're going to be going up against, which is the Cleveland Browns defense.
Yeah.
I think there's certain times you look at numbers, and I think the Chargers have this too when it comes to especially Herbert's passing numbers. I don't think they necessarily tell the entire tale of what's going on this season. I think if you look at the Cleveland Browns defensive numbers, I'm not sure you're going to see the entire tale of what's happened this season because, frankly, through the first 7 weeks of the season, they've spent 80% or so, it feels like, of every game out on the field. And so this is a Cleveland Browns defense, Steven, that I think you probably have expectations of what you're going up against the Browns defense. But when you look at the numbers, it probably doesn't match those expectations. But what you'll find is early in pretty much every game, the Browns defense has looked really, really good. And then as games have gone on, you could just see it. They just are wiped out. I mean, it's just it's happened week after week after week. It happened against. I mean, they made Philly look terrible all week, and then all of a sudden, the end of the game, they spent so much time on the field. Philly got him for a couple big plays. Cincy got him for a couple big plays, and then it wasn't until last week. Last week, they go out and they play the Ravens, and the offense stays on the field and picks up even in the plays where they're not scoring, in the drives where they're not scoring. They're getting first downs. They're getting the ball out towards midfield. They're flipping field position on the ones they're not scoring. And then the defense gets a little rest. And even though the Ravens still put up decent numbers against the Cleveland Browns, they looked like that defense that we've been kind of waiting for a full game all season. So just kind of give us your impressions from a Chargers fan of the Browns defense, where you think they maybe match up really well against the Chargers, because I think there's one battle that is so fun to watch in this game, and I think you'll probably bring it up. And then maybe an area where you feel like the Chargers could exploit the Browns.
Yeah, it's a roster defensively that I think is one of the best rosters in the league, right? They've put a lot of resources, particularly in the defensive line and at cornerback. And so I think you see a ton of talent. And last year you saw one of the best defenses we've seen in the last 15 years. And everybody was back, right? Like they didn't really lose any key pieces from that. So, the expectations from the outside is like, okay, they're just going to, bring this defense back. But it's so difficult in the NFL to maintain elite defensive play, especially when you're dealing with the quarterback situation like they were. And you're talking about time of possession, but again, just like the belief that you're able to go out there and win. And as a defensive player, if you have to go into a game thinking, man, we have to be perfect to have a chance to win this game. And if we mess up at all, there's no real chance that we are able to win this game. So it wears on you psychologically and mentally, as well as on the field. You have to be on the field all the time. So I have a lot of respect for what this defense looks like. Again, I was kind of selfishly hoping that the Browns would kind of go into sell mode. I would love to get Greg Newsome on the Chargers, for example.
Oh man, I think you got a lot of fans that would probably take a pick for that. We'll talk some fans into that.
I loved Greg Newsome coming out of Northwestern, and I know he's been kind of up and down, but we'll see what it is. But the popcorn matchup, right, is obviously Rashawn Slater versus Myles Garrett. They faced off a couple of times already. Rashawn Slater, he has been fantastic this season. He's allowing a pressure percentage just behind, Trent Williams and Lane Johnson, these guys. He's been right up there with the best offensive tackles in the league. And he's really grown tremendously as a run blocker as well. J.K. Dobbins is averaging like 7.5 yards per carry when he's running behind Rashawn Slater, and like 3.5 everywhere else, which is not a coincidence. So that's the popcorn matchup. Myles Garrett is, to me, like the best pure edge rusher in the league, and Rashawn is one of the 3 or 4 best left tackles in the league. So one thing I love about Myles Garrett is he does not shy away from going up against the best left tackle. I wish there were more players like him that do that, because you have obviously like TJ Watt, who never goes against the left tackle. Max Crosby never goes against the left tackle. So I love that, and I think that's a fantastic matchup. The other edge rusher offensive tackle matchup is quite good as well.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. So if I saw the stat right, the 2 offensive tackles, Slater and Alt, haven't given up a sack this year.
No, they have not. This past week, neither of them allowed a single pressure. The week before that, the 2 of them combined for 1 pressure allowed.
Joe Alt is 21 years old.
Yeah, Joe Alt is 21 years old. He's switching positions, and Slater actually was injured during training camp. He had like a little bit of a back issue.
Yeah.
So there's like a 2-week stretch where he was not practicing, and Alt was playing left tackle the whole time. So he really only got like 2 weeks of training camp to play at right tackle, and now he's back out there. He's allowed 6 pressures on the season. His pass blocking efficiency rating is almost a 98, which is insanely good for a rookie. Yes. I actually went back and looked at this in terms of pass blocking grade, run blocking grade, pass blocking efficiency, and total pressures allowed. Only 4 other rookie offensive tackles have hit the numbers that he's hitting, and it's like Rashawn Slater, Taylor Lewan, and I think Mike Onwenu. It's like really rare company that he's been in. So it's a huge advantage. The Chargers' interior offensive line is not very good, but their 2 tackles are awesome. I think both of them should make the Pro Bowl. I think Slater should be an All-Pro. So it's a great tandem to watch. And if you're a big fan of like watching trench play, it's going to be a great tape watch. And I can't wait to go back and see how these matchups pan out, because Za'Darius is a good player. Ogbo's a good player. So this edge rusher offensive tackle matchups are awesome.
Yeah, I think it's where it's at, and that's where I think all of our focus should be when LA has the ball. Although I will say, one of our funnier commenters, world's fastest fat man, said, first of all, he loves to call you guys San Diego, so we're just going to keep rolling with San Diego.
Hey man, we still got broadcasters doing it, and they've been out of LA or out of San Diego since 2017, so it's not that.
But bad. I did see that play. I saw the play this week. I think I don't. Was it the center or one of the guards?
It was Bradley Bozeman, the center. Yeah.
When he saw somebody was on Herbert's leg, just like gator rolling him, like 3 seconds after the play. Yeah. Bradley Bozeman went full helmet into the back, like full on protect the quarterback. That's respect. Lots of respect to that.
The Chargers actually tweeted the link to his foundation, and every fan went out and donated, right? And they ended up raising like $10,000 this week because of what he was. Yeah. So it was really cool to see. Extremely dirty play from Nathan Shepard, I think his name is.
Yeah.
But Bozeman was 100% in the right, and I hope he doesn't get fined for that one.
So let's take it to the other 2 matchups, which would be the Browns offense, and it would be the Chargers defense. And let's go to the Browns offense for a minute. And again, Steven, I told you to, if you wanted to bring anything that you wanted to talk about with the Cleveland Browns, feel free to bring things up here. But obviously the story with the Cleveland Browns is they are healthier than they've been offensively all season. And then all of a sudden you've got Nick Chubb. You got rid of Amari Cooper. He's off to Buffalo. You've got this wide receiver room that includes Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman. And all of a sudden they take the ball, because of injury, they take the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands and they put it in Jameis Winston's hands. And this offense that we've been wondering why it's so broken all year. Why is Kevin Stefanski's offense all of a sudden broken? Is it because they brought in Ken Dorsey and he's helping call plays? Is that why is this offense broken? It really seemed to get answered very quickly against the Baltimore Ravens, one of the AFC's best teams. As with Jameis Winston in the game, the Browns carved up the Ravens defense. It's not the world's greatest defense, but they certainly carved them up. And Jameis Winston just made that offense, that same offense, look like a top-tier NFL offense. So here in Cleveland, there's just a little bit of hope that It's kind of Joe Flacco 2.0. You know what I mean? You've got a veteran quarterback that understands timing. He understands how to drop back, get the ball out of his hands, and get it to the right place. That's what Jameis did week one. And the buzz, it went from we were fighting. We had players and fans fighting because fans cheered when Deshaun Watson got hurt. Some fans, a small amount of fans cheered when Deshaun Watson got hurt. I won't say every fan was really upset about it, but
sure.
We went from that 2 weeks ago to an insanely competent, a powerful looking offense. Beating the Baltimore Ravens in 1 week.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for Kevin Stefanski. I mean, I've seen him do great things with almost any quarterback who, like you mentioned, can just be competent and point and shoot, right? Like, I mean, rescuing Baker Mayfield's career, like that earns you a lot of sway in the league. And then you produce a borderline elite offense with Jacoby Brissett, make the playoffs with Joe Flacco. Like I have a ton of respect for what Kevin Stefanski does. And my main concern is how he will target the Chargers linebackers who are very, very young. They play Denzel Perryman, who's a veteran, but he's mostly a run defender.
Yeah.
So Deion Henley is their like linebacker one, if you will. He didn't play at all last season during his rookie. So he's basically like starting fresh this season. And the flashes are really, really fun. Like he matched up with Trey McBride one-on-one a couple of times last week and had a pass breakup, forced an interception. Like the flashes are really, really fun. But if you're doing a lot of misdirection things that can kind of mess with his vision, he has a tendency to not drop to the proper distances, not drop to the proper landmarks. And it's bitten them a few times. And then their other linebacker is a rookie, Junior Colson, who knows the defense. He went to Michigan, played for Jesse Minter at Michigan, but things are a little fast for him right now. And he's also not seeing things super well. Linebacker, he had his appendix removed in training camp, so he missed the bulk of training camp, unfortunately. So if the Kevin Stefanski and the rest of this offense and kind of make things very difficult from a vision standpoint on the linebackers, they are, susceptible in the middle of the field. And so this could be a pretty big David Njoku game, who I think he's fantastic. So that's like my main concern with the offense. I don't really trust the receivers like it sounds like you guys do. Having watched Jerry Jeudy for 5 years in Denver, I like Cedric Tillman, but my main concern is David Njoku and like what he could potentially do over the middle of the field this week.
Well, you know what? It's a funny thing because I think before this week we would all have said, yeah, like there's no trust in the receivers, but
yeah,
you watch a guy that understands how to throw to them on time and when they're expecting it, and all of a sudden they all looked great.
Yeah,
but Jerry Jeudy was explosive in the game. Cedric Tillman's out there running down past defenders, just looking like a dude that's been a premier NFL wide receiver for 5 years. And it all is just based on, you find out with this offense, it's all just based on timing.
Yeah.
What you find out with these guys is they expect the ball on certain routes at certain times.
Yeah.
And listen, the best wide receivers, it doesn't matter, right? But when you're playing in a flow offensively like they're supposed to play for this team, and the ball isn't showing up when you're thinking it's going to show up, and you're not an elite level wide receiver, it makes things weird. So I wouldn't say we're fully confident, as in like we're not sitting here talking about how we've got the best wide receiver room in the NFL.
Sure.
But we're way more confident now than we were a couple of weeks ago.
And I think that's totally fair. And I really liked Cedric Tillman coming out of Tennessee. I thought he was the better Tennessee receiver prospect that year. I wanted the Chargers to trade for Elijah Moore that year. So I like the players. I don't trust Jerry Jeudy to be a consistent wide receiver. I've seen this song and dance. He's had several good games in Denver, and then hopefully for the Chargers' sake this week, maybe he'll have his usual couple drops and things like that. But to the middle of the field is the key thing. If Kevin Stefanski can get these receivers and tight ends schemed up over the middle, that's where the Chargers are weakest in pass coverage. They have a cornerback room that's probably not like household names. They're starting a rookie 4th round pick, Cam Hart, out of Notre Dame. Yep. But he's been fantastic for them. They're starting Christian Fulton, who kind of wore out his welcome in Tennessee, but he's been good for them. And then Jesse Minter, he just does a lot of he provides a lot of help to the corners. Like he plays a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 6. So it's very difficult to beat the Chargers vertically because the safeties are always back there. So I do kind of trust that Jesse Minter will have an answer for the vertical stuff, but the intermediate area, that's where I'm concerned.
Steven, you unlocked the Browns fans in the comments. You've unlocked them. 3 touchdowns versus the Chargers.
He's capable of doing that, and he did that in Denver. But again, like I guarantee you, I have watched more Jerry Jeudy games than anybody in here, and my dad's a Broncos fan, I would know. So the Jerry Jeudy experience in Denver was very up and down.
That's fair. I do think on this side of the ball, though, in this matchup, again, your eyeballs are just going to go to those trenches again, because I will say, if the Browns fans have a renewed confidence in the wide receivers, you can apply that directly back to the offensive line as well, because with Jed Wills out, and I think Jed Wills' days in Cleveland are numbered.
Such a bummer.
Yeah, it never worked out. But you've got Jack Conklin back. You've got Wyatt Teller back. You're still questionable at your center position, but Joel Bitonio, and they moved DeJuan Jones over to left tackle, where he played a pretty good. I think, if you look at like PFF grades or whatever, it ranked him pretty low. But I think from the vision test, you went, wow, all right, he held his own over there.
He had a good rookie season, I feel like.
He had a really good rookie season. And then he may have gotten a little out of shape in the offseason, which is a bummer when you're like 6'8" and 415 pounds. So he
may or may not have done that at Ohio State also.
He had to cut that back a little bit. But you've got that offensive line, and you've got this Chargers defensive line, which the names are big, right? Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and you've got Bud Dupree over there that's rushing the quarterback. And the thing I find interesting, and maybe you can shed some light on this, the pass rush numbers for the Chargers aren't great this year. They are towards the bottom of the league in as far as just pressuring the quarterback, getting to the quarterback, creating hurry percentages. I want to say Khalil Mack has 3.5 sacks on the year. Joey Bosa has, I think, 2. So just talk to us about that pass rush, because I think from a perspective of like how they're building that defense, it's pretty similar to the Browns. They tried to build from that defensive line and get that pass rush going. So what's going on with those guys this season?
Oh man, Joey Bosa, what an experience! When he was at his best, man, like I loved Joey. Joey was one of my favorite Chargers players. He was defensive rookie of the year. He was an All-Pro player. Since 2021, he has missed 80% of their potential games.
Yeah,
he's had 4 concussions. He's had a tricep tear. He's had a groin tear. He had a foot break sprain thing, and now this year again he has a hip injury. So he played week 1 and he looked awesome in week 1. It was 5 pressures, it was a sack, it was a hit, it was a forced fumble, it was 4 run stops. It was great. At the end of that game he hurt his back, and then he comes back in week 3 and he hurts his hip, and he played on Sunday, and I would say maybe like 60% of himself. Like he did not look like he had the same kind of juice. And then in that game, he hurt his foot again. So I don't think we will see him on Sunday. I think there's a good chance that tomorrow comes around and they place him on injured reserve, unfortunately, which is a big reason why the Chargers have such a low pressure percentage, because Bud Dupree has not really given them what they were hoping. I think has a pass rush win rate of like 4%. So when he gets pressure, he gets a sack, which is good. Like he gets home, which is good, but it's not very good. So that's an issue. They have this defensive tackle room who are all playing fantastic against the run, but they're not really pass rushers. They only have one real like pass rushing defensive tackle, and that's Morgan Fox. So they really have Khalil and Morgan Fox, and that's about it. Like like everybody else in that room is run defending players. So that's really the main reason. And then they're not really able to blitz a lot because they want to make sure they protect their young linebackers, make sure they protect the corners.
Yeah.
So Jesse Minter comes from this weak Martindale world where we were kind of expecting, okay, they're going to blitz like 40% when they're really at like, I think 21% last time I looked. So they're not getting a ton of pass rush productivity up front, and they're not blitzing a lot. So it's basically if Khalil can't win and Morgan Fox can't win, they're not really affecting the quarterback right now.
You know, I feel bad because I feel like I've goaded you into talking about like the things you're concerned about with this Chargers defense, right?
That's what I'm
But
here for.
let's talk about the Chargers defense in a little bit more of a positive light.
Yeah.
They're the number one scoring defense in the NFL. They have allowed the least amount of points of any team in the NFL, 91 points allowed on the season so far. They're the only team that's allowed less than 100 points on the year. So that's with or without bye weeks. It doesn't matter. So it feels to me, Steven, as a guy who doesn't watch every Chargers game, but who kind of like, I get what I'm looking at here. And I know the players on this team that there's maybe a little bit of that bend, but don't break mentality with this Chargers defense. But it seems like they make the plays when they need to.
Yes, I think that's a good way of describing it. They have only faced, I think the number I saw today was 34 plays in the red zone. So they are not letting teams get deep into the territory. They're, I think, second in the league in 3 and outs forced, which has been a huge thing for them. And then one thing the Chargers offense does do well is they have the ability to go on these 10-minute drives from time to time. And so the defense is fresh. They're able to fly around. But the key thing for the Chargers defense is they're defending the run at a really, really high rate. There's a couple big plays here and there that happen, but they're third in the league in rushing success rate allowed. Yes. And then they're able to get into these third and long situations. And while they can't really create a ton of pressure, Jesse Minter is doing a lot of simulated pressures and confusing the picture for these quarterbacks who they're playing. Now, they haven't played a ton of great quarterbacks. I mean, they played Spencer Rattler this past week. They played Bo Nix. They played Bryce Young when Bryce Young was still a starter. They played Gardner Minshew. So it's not like they're playing, murderous row of quarterbacks. They're not playing the AFC North, for example. But they are confusing these lesser quarterbacks, and that's how they're able to get off the field. So, if I'm looking at this game from the Browns' perspective, they have to win on first down. You have to get into a positive down and distance. Otherwise, the Chargers are just going to figure out some ways to muddy the picture for Jameis a bit, maybe force him into a couple errors, etc. But if they can get Nick Chubb to get into a bit of a rhythm, then that's how you beat the Chargers defense, is you stay on schedule on first down.
All right, Steven, I'm going to let you get out of here in a minute, but we got to do a key to the game, and then I got to get your prediction for this one. I'll give you mine to start. And what you just said was going to be my key to the game. We saw
same page.
What's that?
Same page.
We saw a limited number of Nick Chubb runs when he came back 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati. We saw 16 Nick Chubb runs last week, and the numbers are okay. But when he kind of got going there for a minute, he kept us ahead of those second and long, third and long situations, and it just allows for the offense to be so much more relaxed. And so I think for the Browns offensively, get Nick Chubb going, get yourselves ahead of the sticks, get him up to that 20 carries mark for the first time on the season since he's returned from that injury. Again, I'm not that guy. We have jokes here in Cleveland because we got people who think it's an automatic win for the Browns if Nick Chubb carries the ball 20 times. That's not what I'm saying here. I just think give him the ball a little bit more, let Jameis continue to feel comfortable, and keep everything simple, because I think this is an offense that's built to be simple and successful. And that's why I think you see these veteran guys come in here and succeed. Defensively, don't let J.K. Dobbins break off big runs. And as good as Justin Herbert is, the Browns' defensive backfield for me should be able to match up with those wide receivers all over the field. So listen, there are injury issues in Cleveland now. Denzel Ward with his 6th concussion of his career.
That's a ton. I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah left on the stretcher last week with the neck injury. He was released from the hospital. He says all is good. I don't know. They haven't said anything, but I'm highly skeptical that means he's playing this week. But you may be without JOK and Denzel Ward. You're definitely without Denzel Ward on the game if you're Cleveland. So going to have to overcome some injuries. But my prediction is this. I think there's magic.
The
like
Jameis magic is back.
I'm feeling the magic. I'm feeling the Flacco magic with Jameis Winston. Am I 1,000% confident in everything? No, we're 2-6. So how could I be? But I think at home, I think the Cleveland Browns, I think they will have enough. And again, I think defensively, they're really feeling the rhythm right now. And so I'm going to say Cleveland Browns 27, Chargers 21. That's what I'm going to go with my score. Go ahead, Steven.
Yeah, I think it'll be a close game. I think, the Chargers are relying on Ladd McConkey a ton. We haven't talked about him. He just had 111 yards. And
I skipped right over him. That's my fault.
That's okay. It's okay. I talk a lot too, so it works out. But Ladd McConkey is the key to the Chargers passing game. He's the only, above average, like legit pass catcher on the team. And that's shown, right? Like he had an awesome game against Alontae Taylor, who I think is one of the best, slot corners in the league. And so if Ladd can break out a couple big receptions again, that's really how the Chargers kind of make up the margins here. They're not going to kind of dink and dunk you. They just don't have the personnel to do that. Like they've got to create some explosives somehow. And the way that they've done that is Ladd and then J.K. Dobbins. Like the two of them are the explosive play guys. So that's got to happen for the Chargers offense. Defensively, you got to force Jameis into a Jameis game in the negative way.
Yeah,
because we've seen him throw some very questionable decisions, right? And if they can force a turnover or two, get the Chargers a short field, that's the recipe for success for the Chargers. And that's what they've shown in the games that they have won. Get a couple turnovers, short field, J.K. Dobbins explosive run, Ladd McConkey explosive pass. That's the recipe. And, that's kind of the thing. I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game. The Chargers have kind of this nature to like drag teams into these low scoring affairs. And so I am nervous about this game. I do think the Browns with Jameis are a much more formidable team, obviously, than they were previously. He just has a different kind of gear that he can get to. The sound bites are also incredible. So I want to be a homer. I want to say that the Chargers are going to win, but I don't feel great about this kind of matchup. The Chargers don't really have the horses to get into a game where, if they're playing a great defense, it can just kind of get out of hand a bit. So I think the Browns do probably pull out a win here, but I think it's going to be like a 16-13 type of game. Again, just because the Chargers defense just has a way to make plays, right? And so I don't trust the offense enough to say they're going to win. And to answer the question about Ladd, he's about 55% in the slot, 45% outside. So they do scheme him up against, on the outside quite a bit. He had a few matchups against Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside, but he is majority in the slot. But he's not a only Wes Welker type. He does more things than just the typical white slot player stuff.
We know where that question was going. I do want you to know that if Deshaun Watson was starting in this game, I would pick the Chargers 33-8 would be my score prediction. So I just want you to know.
I feel that.
I'm feeling good about where we're at here with Jameis. Listen, again, Steven, it has been awesome. You got to go do your show coming up here next, but make sure you go follow Steven again on Twitter at Steven I. Haglund on Twitter. Follow the Guilty as Charged podcast at GAC Podcast 17. If you want to know what the Chargers are doing coming up into this game against the Browns in Cleveland on Sunday, Steven's the man for the job. So make sure you go check him out. Steven, it's been fun catching up, man. It's been a couple of years, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come join me on the Doghouse here tonight.
Yeah, happy to join. The fans were great. I did see the comments. So world's fastest fat man, if you want to come be more toxic, you're welcome to come in on our chat. We'll be live at 6 p.m. over at the Guilty as Charged podcast and YouTube channel. So
that's 9 p.m.
I appreciate it.
9 p.m. to us.
I'm sorry, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. for you guys.
So, I know you guys get sunlight. It's fine. It's fine.
I know. Well, I appreciate it, man. It's been a blast as always, and hopefully the rest of you guys' way is a more entertaining season, because I know podcasting through that must not have been very fun. So I'm sure it'll be more fun down the road for you.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate that, Steven. Appreciate your time, man. Go have some dinner. Go get your show going on, and we'll talk to you down the line. All
right, man. We'll see you. Thanks, guys.
Again, that's Steven Haglund. What a good dude. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I can't get you guys to hate, but Steven's a good dude. And I loved his insights on the Chargers. Just a guy that really looks at the team, not with rose-colored glasses like maybe I do with the Browns a little bit, but a good, honest look at where the Chargers are at. And again, it's a 4-3. It's a 4-3 team that's coming in here in no way, shape, or form. I know we're all feeling really high over the win, about the win over the Ravens. But again, we're trying to go 2-0 against Harbaugh's this year, and it's going to take that kind of effort for the Browns to do that this week. So, again, here on the OBR, we're going to have you tuned all the way in, all the way up until that game. We've got shows on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. We'll have the pregame on Sunday. We'll have the postgame Sunday night. But this is a 2-show Tuesday, so make sure I'm going to give you guys about 40 minutes. Make sure you go get some rest, go to the bathroom, grab a snack, do whatever you got to do, and then get right back here at 9 o'clock. Yeah, I got a hotel. I know you guys were all asking. I'm in a hotel. I'm up in Detroit right now. So this is my hotel. That's where I'm coming at you from. But listen, tonight we're going to have a lot of fun because we are going to talk more about the Cleveland Browns. And we're going to have fun talking about the Browns on Garage Beers for the first time this entire year. We're going to have fun talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their perfect start to their season, including that huge win last night against the New York Knicks. But I think you guys are really going to, I beg you to come join us. Even if you're not a big hockey fan, we've got the director of communications for the Columbus Blue Jackets coming on with us, Todd Chirac. It's been a crazy, wild whirlwind of a situation for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And obviously the loss of their franchise player, Johnny Gaudreau, in the offseason, and his brother, Matthew, has made such an impact emotionally on the fans and the players and the organization in general. And the Columbus Blue Jackets have come out and played with their hair on fire to start this season. They are a better team than anybody thought they would be. And we're going to have Todd Chirac on to talk about it and to kind of give us his thoughts on everything going on in Columbus. So right here at 9 o'clock, make sure you're tuned in, grab some beers, grab some drinks, whatever you want. Come join us for Garage Beers at 9 o'clock. Otherwise, that's going to, again, for my special guest, Steven Haglund from the Guilty as Charged podcast. For Ian McBride, big shout out to Ian behind the scenes for just whipping up the pictures and getting us on the air and all that. It's been a pleasure having you on. We appreciate you always here on on the Doghouse. And that's going to do it for this episode. Next week, no episode of the Doghouse. We're going to just take a week off of the Doghouse because I got no game to preview next week because it's the bye week. But we'll be back with Garage Beers next week. So I'll see you again for the next Doghouse in 2 weeks. Until then, cheers. And as always, go Browns, everybody.